Tom McCall gave Oregon the first bottle bill in the nation, which required a deposit way back in 1971. Powerful corporate interests fought that. They were very much against it, but he didn't care. He pushed it through and it happened anyway. Now Rene Gonzalez, a Portland City Commissioner, in office just about 4 months, is pushing back against those who like the status quo for the homeless situation. It's earned him the anger of some of the employees that he oversees as the Public Safety Commissioner. I recently talked with him about his actions and his outlook for Portland's future. Okay, speaking of Portland street response, even just this past weekend, there's been news stories about people quitting in protest because you're forcing them to be there when the city is doing sweeps. So what's going on there? Are you misusing that agency?
No, so we know that for a certain percentage of those that are impacted by sweeps, at that moment, it's, emotionally, it can be a significant emotional event, right?
It's been their home, those are their friends, they know that place.
That's right. And, and just to be clear for your listeners, before a campus swept, there's some sort of notice given anywhere from 24 to longer periods of time. So it's not a surprise when the city shows up to sweep those camps. They're notified well in advance of it in almost every case, unless there's some immediate risk to, if there's a true emergency, that will sweep more quickly. But in general, there's a couple of days advance notice typically. But still, for a certain percentage, it is a moment of emotional distress. And Portland Street Response real purpose is to avoid police interactions with those on our street at a time of emotional distress. So that's why we're doing it. The folks doing the cleanups have repeatedly asked that Portland Street Response be there when those suffering from mental illness or otherwise just distraught in that situation demonstrate a need for some support. And I understand the concerns from some in Portland Street Response that
they say that it's causing more, and that as they are there, that gets imprinted on them, kind of.
Yeah, the way I look at it, we all have to do this as a parent, right? Sometimes we have to tell someone no. Doesn't mean I don't love you, doesn't mean I don't care about you, but we have to wear both hats as a grown-up and as an adult. And so that's why I disagree. I understand the concern at some level, but that's where we are in Portland, I think, at this point in time. We will continue to be a compassionate city. I love that about Portland. At the same time, we have to sometimes say no, and that's true for your city government. And the reality particularly in our form of government, with division of labor between the city, county, and state, the city is left to be the first responder, is left to be the one that has to address camps directly. Sometimes we have to tell people no in the city of Portland. That doesn't mean we're turning our back on compassion and connecting them with services and trying to find a way to get them into our social services. And so that's, I understand the concern. I take it seriously, but on balance, I think we have to do both at the same time. Sometimes tell them no, but connect them with services to get them in a better place.
So you're not changing your mind on that one?
No.
Okay. So what I think he's saying is it doesn't really matter whether the folks working at Portland Street Response agree with sweeps or not. Their job is not to set city policy, basically. Their job's to be available when people are having a mental health crisis. And sometimes that happens during sweeps of camps, and that's why they need to be there then. We also talked more in depth about mental health and the closing of Damish. That's the state mental hospital that closed back in 1995.
All we did was take a certain segment of our mentally ill, initially drive them into jails, and then after that, drive them onto the streets of Portland. And we've never fixed the problem. And you throw in addiction, you throw in, I think our compassion in the city of Portland and in the state sometimes gets used against us. I think
so there's lots of services and lots of money.
And just the mindset, I think that we've developed this reputation nationally that, if they're tough on you in Idaho, it's going to be a lot easier in Oregon, and in particular Portland, if you want to camp outside and use hard drugs. And I think that we're going to have to reset that before we're going to make any meaningful dent in this. I also, at the same time, think we need to make the upstream investments that that a lot of politicians like to talk about. I actually agree with a lot of them. You know, every dollar that we invest intelligently in addiction services and mental illness, I'm supportive of it. You know, it's can't just be harm reduction, which has its own purpose. But if we're building beds and we're finding ways to treat, I'm all for it. I believe in that part of it. I also think economic activity and economic opportunity in the region is crucial. Folks have to make enough to be able to afford housing here, and we do have to address housing supply. But even if we do those things, I still think we're going to have a certain segment of our population that is going to end up on the streets. And my main thing is I just want to be careful that we're not attracting too much of it to the city relative to our neighbors.
And that brings up an interesting question that I hear a lot. Where are all these people living on our streets coming from? Did they grow up here? From somewhere else? I looked into that today. This is my source. It's the federally required point-in-time survey that counts homeless folks who are on the streets and others living in shelters or with friends. This report was done back in 2022, but it has the most recent numbers that are out and available. Of the 459 people living unsheltered who were contacted in Multnomah County, 34.4% reported that they are from Oregon. 62% are from somewhere outside the state. That includes Washington, California, and anywhere else you can think of. 3.5% did not answer the question. So just over a third are from Oregon, but the rest are from somewhere else. Now, getting back to our discussion with City Commissioner Rene Gonzalez, he told Portland Street Response to stop handing out tents to the homeless during the winter because it caused a fire danger, and with many homeless folks getting hurt in those tent fires. He also told street response workers to show up and help folks in crisis when the city sweeps the homeless camps. That's what we've just been talking about. But I asked about the criticism that he got for those two main moves.
You know, some threats of protests. Certainly, we've had folks show up at City Hall. There were threats made against my home, and so all the elements that have come with being an elected official in 2023 in Portland, Oregon, that really wasn't true 4 or 5 years ago, but is true now. Got to witness all of that in the first 100 days. And, you know, folks want to threaten your sense of security and privacy, certainly. I think it's unfortunate, but I think the city is becoming more robust in how we respond. I also got hundreds, if not thousands, of support emails. I get people who stop me all the time in the city of Portland who thank me for what I did, because it became sort of a symbolism. I mean, in substance, Portland Street Response wasn't handing out that many tents and tarps relative to others in the public realm.
Because there's still a lot of people giving out tents and tarps.
That's right. We got a lot of nonprofits that are still doing it. We still, you know, the Joint Office on Homelessness, I think they've curtailed it a great deal, but, you know, there's still a lot of tents and tarps that came from the Joint Office on Homeless that are on our streets. But it became a little bit of a symbol for, you know, can we stop this enablement path and really, you know, things that we're doing with our heart, but that on balance may not really make sense. It became a symbolism to sort of, you know, take a step back. And so I get both, you know, I get it's with a lot of intensity both ways. I was walking down the street the other day and a group of senior citizens just started clapping for, you know, it's like, and I'm not sure what they were happy about, but it was right after the, you know, the tent ban. And, you know, so we'll interpret it that way. I don't really know what they were clapping about, but it's like, you know, so you get both sides of it.
Commissioner Rene Gonzalez says that he will keep pushing for what he thinks is right for Portland's future. One of those things is less tolerance for extreme behavior on the far right and on the far left side of the political spectrum.
You know, I think as Portlanders, we really need to take a step back and think about what we've tolerated in the political dialogue. And I guess what I'm saying is, you know, I think we have to confront some of the extremism on both sides that have really disrupted our political processes. We shouldn't tolerate it. And we've tolerated too much of that extremism on both sides. It undermines our democracy. It drives good people out of their willingness to serve. And it's allowing some really powerful institutions that can do good to be disrupted and undermined.
It was an interesting conversation. Rene Gonzalez was elected to what normally would be a 4-year term, but because of the city's form of government changing, he'll need to run again in November of 2024 if he wants to get reelected. Last night, we ran part 1 of that conversation and then asked for you for feedback on Gonzalez, and holy smokes, you did not disappoint. Eric wrote in to say, "Thank God someone is making sense about not handing out tents. I love his positions. Downtown Portland is not a campground." And Ron wrote, "It was refreshing to finally hear someone with some common sense in city government." Jackie agreed, writing in, "Finally, someone with a clue. Great story. You're answering the questions I keep asking myself. Let's elect more people like Mr. Gonzalez. He is thoughtful and decisive, something sorely missing in other elected officials."
Gonzalez is not only intelligent and responsible in his approach to the tent fire problem, but he at last is someone who has the courage to stand strong in the face of criticism. What a guy. He is my new hero.
All right. Now, not everyone agreed, but the input probably was like 85% for Gonzalez, maybe 15% against. But just to show you that we welcome all sides, here is the only negative email that came in on this. Jeff wrote in part, "It's an inhumane argument to say that a fraction of all tents experience fires, so we should deny tents to everyone. Warming centers are notoriously insufficient. Hard to imagine. We can do better than shutting down kindness toward our fellow citizens." Very disappointing decisions from a new member of our government. And someone who did not leave their name called in to also criticize the commissioner's decisions on tents.
I would like to see Gonzalez out there on the street in 25-degree weather with no tent, no blanket, and just the clothes on his back that were very thin, and see what it feels like to be a homeless person where we have tents and blankets that we can keep somebody warm with, and he refuses to let street response give them out. That's just absolutely ludicrous. He should be out there on the street seeing what it feels like.
But most comments we got last night were more like this from Susie.
I absolutely agree with Rene Gonzalez, and God bless him for taking a stand about this. We don't need to be handing out tents to everybody. We are throwing money away to these people. It's stupid. I'm tired of it. It's insanity. I do not recognize this city.
And we'll give Kathy the last word on this tonight. She emailed to say, "All I can say is thank you, Rene. Finally, a sensible city council member." And thanks to each of you who took time to write or call in. I'm sorry if we didn't get a chance to use your comment. We get way more than we can use these days on the show. But we do read all the emails and we do listen to all of your voicemails. So if you have more thoughts on this, feel free to write us. The address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090.